When the god of chaos captures the deity's most powerful weapons and creates an armor of the apocalypse, a young human helps a fallen god destroy it and goes to the underworld to save his wife's soul. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Gods of Egypt, from 2016. At the beginning of time, Egypt was the birthplace of all life on Earth. When they came across that paradise, the deities decided to live there together with their inferior creation, humans. However, the gods were taller than mortals and had gold running through their veins instead of blood. What's more, they had the ability to transform themselves into any kind of monster. Over time, Egypt was divided between two powerful brothers. Osiris, the god of life, was the beloved king of all the lands surrounded by the river Nile. His brother, Set, the god of chaos, ruled the arid desert and became even stronger and more bitter as a result of his isolation. Many years passed and the time came for Osiris to crown a new king, his only son, Horus. So all humans were invited to take part in this great celebration. Among the inhabitants of that kingdom are Beck and Zaya, a young couple in love who are planning to get married soon. While preparing for his coronation, Horus talks to Hathor and tries to convince her to become his queen. However, the goddess of love says that although she loves him, she will not be easily won over. After all the other gods of Egypt have taken their places, Osiris stands before the crowd of humans who serve him to present their new king. However, before his nephew could be crowned, Set appeared and presented Horus with a ram's horn. After blowing it, the Lord of the Air realizes that a great army is approaching. After his soldiers invade, Set challenges his brother to a duel because he wants to be the new king to take the throne. But when he hears this, Osiris refuses to fight, so Set doesn't think twice before cowardly stabbing him with his dagger. While his brother is being supported by his family, Set orders the other gods to bow down to him, otherwise they will be eliminated. The same sentence is applied to mortals, because those who refuse to worship him will be imprisoned. In his first speech, Set states that from now on, humans will have to buy their way into the afterlife with riches. Unlike Osiris, he doesn't believe that this is a gift that should be given as a present, but rather as merit. After the perishment of his father, Horus attacks his uncle and manages to destroy his shield. During the battle, Nephthys, the goddess of protection, uses her wings to form a barrier around the queen to protect her from any attack. After being struck, Horus assumes his bestial form to continue the duel and Set decides to do the same, so they both start a battle in the skies. Seeing the palace being destroyed, the humans decide to flee to avoid being hit by the rubble and, in the middle of the crowd, Zaya and Beck end up separating. When they realize that their king is losing the fight, Set's soldiers use their reflective shields to blind Horus and the prince is defeated. Before eliminating his nephew, Set decided to gouge out his eyes and, just as his beloved was about to be eliminated, Hathor decided to intervene. That day, she managed to convince the new king to spare Horus' life and Set crowned himself. Over the next few years, many gods tried to fight him, but they all paid with their lives. For mortals, things became worse and worse, as many were turned into prisoners and had no pennies to buy their passage to the afterlife. While Beck was forced to do manual labor, Zaya got a job in the library, but the two continued to meet every day. The young woman still has hope that Horus will return to save his people from prison, but for that to happen, he needs his eyes back. Determined to help free his beloved, Beck decides to break into Set's vault and enlists Zaya's help to read the blueprint and find out how to increase his chances of success. Hiding in a carriage full of gold, the young man manages to break into the vault and soon discovers that he will have to go through several traps to get to the statue of Set. Suddenly, while walking across the bridge, Beck triggers one of the traps and has to dodge the statues that are trying to slice him with their swords. When he finally catches sight of one of Horus' eyes, the young man starts running towards it and the bridge collapses. Luckily, Beck manages to reach the statue of Set and, after catching the eye, he falls into the vault, where he encounters dozens of scorpions. Seeing those animals heading towards him, Beck uses the eye of Horus to ward them off and manages to get away unharmed. After completing his mission, the young man goes to meet Zaya and discovers that Urshu has found out about the couple's plans, so now they're both in trouble. At that moment, Beck realizes that he is going to be eliminated, so he decides to try a risky way out. After using the eye of Horus to blind the guards, he grabs Zaya and flees out of the city. However, during the escape, the young woman is hit by an arrow in the chest and ends up dying. Now, all that remains for Beck is to continue his mission, so he goes to meet Horus, who has been in exile since his father's perishment. When he discovers that a mortal has one of his eyes, Horus orders him to give it back, but Beck says he wants to make a deal. At that moment, he is attacked by the blind god, but manages to dodge all his blows and says that he will give up Horus' eye if he can save Zaya from elimination. With no other choice, the god accepts the deal, but even with all his power he can't bring the girl back. So the only option is to summon Anubis to take her safely to the afterlife. Seeing his beloved leave without even being able to say goodbye, Beck is furious and says he won't give up Horus' eye. However, he changes his mind when he realizes that he could end up being eliminated and says that he will help Horus break into Set's pyramid to recover his second eye. However, this part of the agreement will only be fulfilled if Zaya is brought back, otherwise Beck will prefer to be eliminated so that he can meet her again. Upon hearing this, Horus states that no one can leave the afterlife after making the passage, but the journey through the 9 gates takes days to complete. According to the Lord of Air, only the king can make Anubis return a soul, so if he eliminates Set and recovers the crown before Zaya goes through the last portal, Beck will be able to get his beloved back. Meanwhile, Set discovers that some gods are gathering in Nephthys fortress with the aim of joining forces to confront him. So the king decides to march there with his soldiers to eliminate his enemies, and Hathor must accompany him, as she agreed to become queen of Egypt so that Set would leave Horus alive. To be able to defeat Set, Horus decides to pay a visit to his grandfather, Ra, the sun god. After climbing to the top of a mountain, Horus says a prayer to his grandfather and asks for the strength to transform, because without one of his eyes he doesn't have enough power to complete the transformation. However, after receiving his grandfather's blessing, Horus manages to acquire his original form and fly to Ra's palace. At that moment, he orders Beck to stay hidden behind his shadow, otherwise the heat emitted by the sun god will burn him. Before Horus had a chance to express the reason for his visit, Ra interrupted him and said he had important work to do. After putting on his crown, the sun god transforms into his most powerful version and orders his grandson to hide the mortal under the deck if he wants him to survive. The Prince of Egypt immediately follows his grandfather's orders and is amazed to see him fighting a giant monster that sails through the sky. With his flaming spear, Ra shoots rays of fire at the world-eating worm and says that he will never let it destroy the earth. When Apep leaves, Ra reveals why he can't live in Egypt with the other gods, because he has the burden of fighting the creature night after night to protect humans. After the battle, Horus reveals why he went to his grandfather's palace and asks for his help to stop Set, but Ra refuses to interfere in the battle, as both Set and Osiris are his sons. So Horus asks permission to fill his canteen with the heavenly waters and then says goodbye to his grandfather. Meanwhile, the royal army battles the gods who have rebelled against their king, and Set manages to invade the fortress of Nephthys, his ex-wife. Seeing the merciless king approaching, the goddess of protection tries to flee, but is caught in midair and has her wings torn off. After leaving his grandfather's palace, Horus loses his powers and lands in an oasis in the middle of the desert. Tired from his journey, Beck spots a waterfall and walks over to get some water. Just then, Nevis, one of Set's royal guards, appears and captures the young man, because Urshu has informed his king that the eye of Horus has been stolen by a mortal. Just as Beck was about to be thrown off the cliff, the god of air appears and fights Nevis's army. Despite being an excellent warrior, without one of his eyes, Horus is not as strong as usual, so warriors feel more encouraged to face him. However, even at a disadvantage, the prince proves capable of defeating his enemies and eliminates Nevis shortly after he has thrown Beck off the cliff. Horus then discovers that the young man managed to survive by holding onto a rock before falling into the waterfall. While the pair talk about the next steps in their plan, Nevis gets up and hits Horus with a rock. At that moment, the god of air faints and falls into the water. Then Beck jumps into the waterfall after him and, just as they are both about to perish from the fall, Horus wakes up. He immediately uses his 2-pronged spear to cling to the rocks and manages to stop the fall. Minutes later, the pair reach the edge of the waterfall and flee through the forest to try and escape Nevis. When he returns to the castle, the Minotaur reveals what has happened, and Set is disappointed to discover that all his warriors have been defeated by Horus, who fought them alone to save a human. After receiving all the updates on his nephew's plans, Set rips off Nevis's head and decides to send a Nott and Astarte to stop Horus. Now that he rules the realm of the living, Set plans to conquer the realm of the deceased as well and enlists Hathor's help to get there. The goddess of love was once an advisor to the unliving, so she knows how to get to the underworld. Although she doesn't want to help Set become even more powerful, she must follow his orders to stay alive. However, that afternoon, Hathor uses her powers to find the location of Horus, because she wants to go and meet her beloved. In doing so, she ends up being caught by Set and, feeling betrayed, the man prepares to attack his wife. When she realizes that her life is at risk, Hathor removes her bracelet and travels to the realm of the unliving, where she is met by a legion of demons. When she puts the bracelet back on, she manages to teleport to the desert and goes in search of her ex-boyfriend. At dawn, Horus and Beck arrive at one of the temples of Osiris and decide to stop for a rest. Suddenly, they see Anat and Astarte approaching in the company of their giant snakes and decide to run away so as not to end up being hit by the flames. While they hide, Beck comes up with a plan and decides to act as bait to attract the predators while Horus attacks the snakes with his spear. However, by piercing the animal's neck, the deity ends up becoming the new target and has to hide behind one of the pits. When the creature tries to devour him, Horus pierces its mouth with his spear and manages to trap it in the rocks while starting a duel against Astarte. Seeing her pet wounded, the woman abandons the fight to help him free himself, and Horus takes the opportunity to chase the white snake while Beck lures it into the temple. Knowing that there is a cliff on the other side, Horus uses Anat's whip to tie her to the giant rattlesnake's body, and, as he tries to reach Beck, the animal heads for the cliff. Since it can't stop in time, the snake ends up falling and Anat is taken into the abyss with it, as she can't free herself. At that moment, all the columns supporting the temple begin to collapse and the pair have to flee to avoid being crushed. Suddenly, Horus sees Hathor approaching and believes that she has been sent to eliminate him. However, instead of doing so, the goddess of love uses her charms to convince Astarte's serpent to set fire to her own body, buying time for Horus and Beck to escape. After the creature's elimination, Hathor says she will help Horus find Set's weakness as a way of redeeming herself for betraying him. Despite being furious with his ex-girlfriend, the prince accepts her help because he discovers that what he is looking for is hidden inside the pyramid. However, in order to find Set's greatest treasure, it is necessary to answer the riddle of the Sphinx. So Horus decides to take a detour on his route to ask Thoth for help. That afternoon, the trio crosses the swamp to reach the library of the God of Wisdom. Upon entering, they come across countless copies of Thoth, and Horus claims that these are his servants, as the God of Wisdom only trusts himself. With Beck's help, Horus manages to convince Thoth to join him on this journey, and the group begins a new journey towards the pyramid. Along the way, Hathor discovers why Beck agreed to help Horus get his crown back and is furious with her ex-boyfriend because she knows he lied about bringing Zaya back. Since she spent part of her life in the world of the unliving, the goddess of love knows very well that not even Anubis has the power to bring her back to life, and she feels sorry for the young man who is patiently waiting for the moment when he will see his beloved again. During a brief conversation, she tells Beck that her duty was to help the souls of the deceased make their way to the afterlife. However, at that time, she was conquered by demons and ended up being trapped in the underworld until Horus appeared to free her. To save his beloved, the warrior had to eliminate countless demons and gave Hathor a 42-star bracelet to keep all those creatures away from her. At that moment, the goddess of love helps Beck get in touch with Zaya, and he takes the opportunity to give her a message. The young man reveals that he is helping Horus to regain his throne, and, when that happens, he will bring her back. However, when Zaya tries to answer her beloved, Anubis interrupts the transmission and says that the unliving are forbidden to talk to the living. When he arrives at the pyramid, Beck risks his own life to get in and opens the door so that the gods can follow him. They then walk together to the Sphinx, and Thoth tries to find the answer to the riddle, but ends up failing. Just then, the Sphinx attacks him and Horus has to fight it off while the God of Wisdom thinks of a second answer. When Thoth finally manages to unravel the riddle, the Sphinx turns to sand and opens the way for the group to continue their journey. As he approaches the pyre, Horus prepares to pour the water he has collected from the celestial lake and extinguish it, as he knows this will weaken his uncle. What he didn't realize was that Set was already waiting for his arrival and had set a trap to capture him. While Horus and Hathor try to escape from the cage, Set appears and steals Thoth's brain, so Beck rushes to put out the desert fire. However, before the young man could pour the water, Set tells him that Horus has tricked him, because not even he can bring a soul back from the underworld. While Beck tries to find out who is telling the truth, Set steals the flask and throws out all the water from the heavenly lake. He then leaves, because he knows that the pyramid is about to collapse and he expects the trio to be crushed. However, Horus manages to escape the trap and helps his allies survive the collapse. When he realizes that he has been tricked, Beck rebels against all the gods and, in the hope of putting things right, Hathor decides to sacrifice herself. After summoning Anubis to a meeting, she informs him that she will hand over her bracelet so that Zaya can have the chance to receive eternal life. However, Horus knows that if she does this, she will be sent back to the underworld and they won't be able to see each other again. After saying goodbye to her beloved, Hathor removes her bracelet and is sucked into the world of the unliving. Horus then gives the object to Beck and the young man is taken away by Anubis. At that moment, Zaya is on her way to the Hall of the Two Truths, where all mortals are judged to find out if they will have eternal life. Those who don't have enough valuable treasure to put on the scales are completely exterminated and can't move on to the afterlife. When it's Zaya's turn to pay her tribute, Beck shows up and gets the chance to see her again. Meanwhile, Set is preparing to rule over all of the two kingdoms and is making an armor capable of holding the brain of Thoth, the heart of Osiris and the eye of Horus. Now that he is more powerful than ever, the god of chaos decides to pay his father a visit and reveals that he is seeking immortality. To do this, he needs to eliminate Ra so that the demon Apep can destroy the world of the unliving. When he discovers his son's true intentions, the sun god prepares for battle and attacks his opponent with his flaming spear. However, Set uses his armor to protect himself and manages to survive the attack. He then stabs his father with a dagger and uses his own spear to send him into exile. Just as Beck was about to make the payment so that his beloved could enter the world of the unliving, Anubis announces the arrival of Apep, for the portal between the world of the living and the deceased has just been broken. At that moment, Zaya asks Beck to help Horus reverse this chaos, and the young man returns to the world of the living with the bracelet in hand. With Nephthys' help, the pair manage to travel back to the river Nile, and Horus claims that Ra is still alive. According to him, only his grandfather can fix all the chaos that Set has caused, but for that he needs his spear. Determined to get it back, Beck and Horus must return to the palace and capture Urshu to help them reach the top of the tower. However, when Horus jumps out of the elevator and starts climbing, Urshu begins his provocations. When he hears the man talking about Zaya's perishment, Beck attacks him and the two start a duel. While the mortals fight among themselves, Horus manages to reach the top and attacks his uncle in an attempt to recover Ra's spear. The problem is that if Set was already powerful before, now that he has taken possession of the most powerful weapons of the other gods, he has become practically invincible. After knocking his enemy off the tower, Beck uses a rope to climb to the top. When he gets there, he finds Horus about to be eliminated and uses a rope to prevent him from being pierced by the spear. When he realizes that he is being challenged by a mere mortal, Set becomes furious and attacks the young man. Just then, Beck manages to steal the eye that was attached to the armor and returns it to Horus. But instead of taking back his greatest treasure, the Lord of the Air chooses to save the life of Beck, who was about to fall from the tower. At that moment, they both end up being knocked down, but during the fall, Horus manages to transform and takes his ally to safety. After saying goodbye to Beck, he goes to meet his uncle to finish the job and attacks Set with all his fury. Now his goal is not just to become king, but to protect his people. With this in mind, Horus becomes even more powerful and throws Set down. During the fall of the king of Egypt, the entire tower is destroyed and Set is seriously injured. At that moment, Horus approaches and uses the spear of Ra to exterminate his uncle. He then goes to meet his grandfather and, after waking up from his deep sleep, Ra sends Apep back to where he came from. Thanks to Anubis, the world of the unliving was not destroyed by the attack, so Zaya and the other souls will be able to move on to the afterlife. After the battle, Horus is greeted with great joy by his people and manages to recover his second eye. When he meets Beck, the Lord of Air realizes that the young man has been seriously wounded in the battle against Set and ends up dying. So he decides to take the human's body to the place where Zaya is so that they can both be buried together. While Horus mourns the perishment of his friend, Ra appears and claims to be in debt to his grandson. So the sun god says he will grant him any wish and is surprised when his grandson asks him to bring Beck and Zaya back to life. After restoring the kingdom and returning everything that was stolen from the other gods, Horus is ready to be crowned king of Egypt and relies on the wisdom of Thoth to guide him in his reign. That day, Beck gave Horus back Hather's bracelet and the king set off on a journey to the underworld to rescue his beloved. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.